the little wins are all really big wins because it's the first time your product has been like, I can remember the first plant store that ever picked us up. It was a plant store in Dallas, the Plant Project, and we got on a Zoom call and we had this long sales pitch, and she agreed. Our friend Brie agreed to carry Flourish, and so when that happened, and she wasn't we didn't know her at the time, but she agreed to
She's a
carry
friend
Flourish.
now, but before that,
She's our friend now, yeah.
kind of
But so
outreach.
yeah, and so the very first plant store we ever launched in, or the first month of e-com sales, those wins were huge in like relative to where the business was. As you grow with the business, wins now that are huge wins relative to signing on our first independent store, they don't feel quite as big anymore. And so I think it becomes a challenge because in the beginning, I
The
think
punch.
you're very good at celebrating the wins because it's so exciting, it's novel, it's new. I think as you continue on in the business, you have good days and you have bad days, and you have challenging moments, and the problems, with great risk comes great responsibility. With, the bigger you are, the bigger your problems are going to be. You know what I mean? So I think that those challenges just they scale with the business basically. And so the scary moments are scarier, but the wins are also bigger.
Well,
And I
yeah.
think that navigating that new normal as the business grows is a challenge, honestly. But I think that if you can take the time to reflect, if you can surround yourself with people that have done it before you, that have charted paths, somewhat similar to yours, that have scaled businesses, grown businesses, it helps to remind you that like what you're feeling is not novel, like they felt that same way. And I think that just doing anything for the first time, or experiencing something for the first time, can feel kind of isolating or can feel like challenging. And then, if you surround yourself with a strong community of other entrepreneurs and people, you have these conversations and you realize like, oh, this is so normal to feel, or you
You're
experience this
right.
as well.
But can you share how many no's you got until you got that first yes?
Absolutely. Tons and tons of no's.
Tons
I
and
mean,
tons.
tons and
You're
tons.
not everybody. It's not easy. So
No.
tons and tons, but that passion and the belief that you had something that was going to be helpful and solve the problem, that kept you going. So you're saying dozens, hundreds?
I mean, it's in all sorts of facets of the business. I mean, we had no's from tons and tons of plant boutiques that said, oh no, we're not going to carry your product. Like, you don't have a track record.
I know,
So we had
right?
lots.
Because, right, it's hard, but you gotta
Yeah,
start somewhere.
exactly. We heard no's from people that were going to, we had approached some investors. We heard tons and tons of no's there. We heard no's from partners in manufacturing because we couldn't meet MOQs. I mean, it is a string of no's, and then you get the yes, and then you move forward, and then you've solved that problem. But I think that that's like going back to that problem solving, is that like, as long as you have to find a solution. So the problem isn't the crazy part. I mean, if you have people to ask, then you're on your way to a yes. You know what I mean? Like it's
That's a
the
great
problem
way of
is when
looking
you
at it. That's a
the
great way of looking at it.
yeah. So the problem is when you run out of people to ask, when you run out of ideas for solutions. Because as long as you keep running at a problem with trying different types of solutions, eventually one will.
Well, okay, so what's the hardest thing? We talked about some of your biggest, we say most exciting win is your first kind of plant store that someone's going to
Yeah.
carry your carry flourish. What was one of the hardest things or one of the hardest snacks along the way?
Yeah, I think that there were moments where we felt that we were running at something that was maybe not the right thing. So having invested time, energy, dollars into something, and then realizing that the strategy that you have in place is actually maybe not the right strategy. And so having to just say like, all right, well, we learned a lot, but like, we got to kind of cut our losses and we got to pivot. And I think it's very hard to pivot because you're admitting you're wrong. You're admitting that a hypothesis that you thought that you were testing, or something that you believe to be true, is actually not true. And I think that reflecting and realizing that is like a really hard thing in the business. And I think it's your ego that kind of gets in the way, and your ego will always get in the way throughout business. Like, it doesn't matter what it is, but it's like, that is when things feel the hardest, is when your ego gets involved. And so, it can be a challenge with like a channel strategy, or like something that's very like specific to the business, or it can be like just admitting you've made a mistake and then having to pivot. And I think those are the hardest moments, like when you're.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you and I chatted about before we came on is that, you know, I don't know if it's inherent in women. I don't know if it's inherent just in human beings. We're always looking for that external validation. And I
Right.
loved how you explained to me, you know, at first you start out for this external validation. Before you know it, you've proven enough to yourself that you can do it, that that validation is now intrinsic. That, did I say that right? Is that kind of what you're,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I think when I first started Flourish, it was a lot about proving it to other people. It was about proving Lila and I felt like we had something to prove to the people that had supported us, the people that had raised us, not because they weren't always very supportive, but just they were betting on us. And so it was like we felt like, oh, like we have to, make them proud and things like that. And that never goes away. You never don't want to make your friends and your family proud. But I think that what happened fairly quickly for me, at least, was this feeling of, okay, I've done it. So I don't have anything I have to prove, but instead I want to build this thing. And that like shift for me, I think really helped to advance the business and advance how I approached the business. It advanced how I thought about the business. And having that internal motivation to get up every day and to drive it forward, I think it became a lot more rewarding. It became a lot less about everyone around me and more so about me and our company and our team and the people that, had it became more rewarding for me.